Hi, Wayne O'Keefe here, and I've been really struggling with bites today. I've put my rod down a number of times, and what has happened is I've been getting some hits on it, or I've just seen nothing and I've wound it in and all the bait is gone. Now this means that today they're a bit finicky, that they're not biting that hard, and so it's really hard to detect anything on your rod if you're not watching it all the time. So typically what I'll do is use a graphite rod. This is a 2.1 meter graphite rod, holds between 2 and 5 kilo line with a cork handle. Now the graphite being important because the graphite is quite stiff. This is a fast action rod, which means it really only most of the action on the rod, it bends at about the top 20% or 30% of the rod. The rest of it remains quite stiff. The thing about that is, unlike fiberglass, which has got a lot of give in it, a lot of bend, this graphite radiates the feel of anything hitting your bait through the line to the rod and to your hand. The other thing is that I've got a cork handle on this. Now, unlike EVA, which is that black foam, the cork also is quite a stiff material and radiates all of the activity on through the rod into the cork, into your hand. So if you're holding a rod like this, you've got the line a little bit tight, just so that you can feel any touches of the fish. Everything comes to your hand and you know what's going on. The way that I touch fish is just simply a balanced rig like this will just simply lean forward like that a little bit. So when I cast in, which I've done, I wind in so that I make sure, first off, that the line is stretched a little bit. So I don't want to put too much weight on it. I want the fish to be able to move around too much without feeling too much resistance. But once I've got enough connection there from the line through the rod, I know I can feel every little touch and pull that happens. So I keep my hand open like that. I usually sit with the rod and my elbow on my knee, just holding it like this, and I just push it to the side so that I make a little bit of connection with the line so that it's fairly taut. And then I just leave it like that. Now I can sit here relaxed for a long time and I can feel everything that's happening through the line. So if a fish pulls it slightly or it's hitting a little bit, I can feel all of that. So that's a great way of knowing what's going on. So instead of me not thinking that I'm not getting bites or wondering why the bait is disappearing, I know that there's little fish already hitting at that bait. So I know there's a lot of little pickers around. What I'm waiting for is, instead of the little tap taps which I can feel in my hand, if I just feel the rod move slightly, that means a fish has picked up that bait and pulled it to the side or pulled it away. I feel all of that through my hand, and then I can strike. A fish only needs to pull the rod tip about that far, and I feel that action, and then I can strike. So if I was to feel that, I would strike up like that and I would have the fish. So this method is well worth trying, especially if you're having trouble striking into fish, or at least they're not hooking themselves, and on days where you just seem to be losing that bait. If you are losing the bait, trim it down a little bit so that there's less on the hook. And then the other thing is to maybe try touch fishing, because it's also pretty exciting. Once you actually feel the activity, you know exactly what's going on. You're in touch with the activity under the water, and you know that there's a potential for catching a fish. So as a technique, it works very well. It adds a bit of interest to things, and also you'll know whether there are little fish around. Anyway, I've just hooked this fella here. He's pretty thick. That'd be certainly a breeder, certainly legal size. I'll be returning this one, but it was all based on me holding the rod in my hand and feeling the small bites that were coming from the tip. The fish have been really hard today, and what they've done is been dropping the bait, picking the bait, dropping the bait, and not doing much. And I actually had to hook this fish, so it wasn't a really hard bite at all. But by using it, the touch fishing technique, it really worked well. But this is a beauty today, and I'll be returning this one. Fantastic fight on light gear, so it's well worth trying that technique. It's autumn and there's been quite a bit of rain, so the water is the colour of milk coffee, so it's got a little bit of silt in it. So today I really had to use things that would attract the fish, so things that had scent in them. The fish weren't going to be able to see anything, but they were certainly going to be able to smell it. So I used ground bait to attract the fish to my hook, and I cut up a lot of little bits and pieces of bait to put into that ground bait. So the burley or ground bait that I used was just simply breadcrumbs mixed with bits of bait. Added some water, made it into a fluffy mix, just like sort of like a cake mix, I guess. And then I used a burley cage, a small burley cage like this, just as my sinker. And I had that on a running line, so that acted as my sinker. But what it did is it brought everything close to my hook. Oops, my hook there. Now, the fish, when I first started, I couldn't get bites at all. And so what I had to do is, even though I'm only using about 3 kilo line, I felt that I had to go down to something a bit smaller. I always use or always carry lighter diameter lines with me. So I've actually made a trace. I've actually put a piece of line that's much finer than this one. So this one's very, very fine, but it's a pre-stretched low diameter line that is still quite strong. So this might be, the main line was say 3 kilos, this is about 2.5 kilos, so it's not that far off, and yet it's so fine that when I had a small hook on it, the hook looked really natural on the bottom. It behaved like any other bait would. The stiffer line might have been causing the bait not to present itself quite as well, maybe to look a little bit different and scare the fish a bit. In other words, it didn't look like what they were expecting. So when I put the lighter line on there, it made it act more naturally. So it was just a running line, and that worked today. I was casting, at one point I cast in close, and I didn't need to use a burley cage. I could have just used a running sinker, which is what I had, but I always have a swivel on my line so that I can disconnect say if I'm using a burley cage, or if I'm using a running sinker, I can disconnect that and change it. Now I have sinkers that have a little swivel on them as well, so I can connect those. So if I'm in close, I'll just use a normal sinker and I'll throw the burley in, and then I'll cast to where the burley is. Today I had to cast across the other side, so I couldn't throw that far, so I had to use a burley cage. And this rod and this line worked very well today in these type of conditions, and I'll just show you some of the fish that I caught. So in about 3 hours I've caught these bream. I'll put all of these back, but it gives you an indication of just how good this waterway is. I mean, bream of this size, most people would be proud to have bream of this size. That was a good catch. Caught that one, that particular one, on that line with the lighter line, and with just 4 maggots. So that's not a bad bream to catch. I'll return him right now. Likewise, there were other bream, not quite as big, but certainly plenty of those happening that I was catching in there, just on that lighter line, and a touch fishing method, which worked very, very well. And then of course they got smaller during the day, but the fact is I was catching fish, and so I was having fun doing it, which is what fishing's all about anyway. So there's some little ones as well. And one more, little fella. So there you go. Took me about 3.5, 4 hours to actually catch those fish. I caught others, small mulloway, which I didn't put into my keep net. But the fact is that if I hadn't have used that lighter line, I wouldn't have been hooking those fish, because they were very, very very, very touchy today. They were not hooking themselves at all. Everything had to be hooked. What I did do though is I took a range of baits with me. So today I had pippies, I had prawns, I had worms, I had maggots, and what was happening is that a lot of the smaller fish were picking off those baits. Like the pippies went straight away, the prawns were being pulled apart. So what I had to do was I had to go down from a size, I started on a size 8 hook, I had to go down in size, down to size, I think I finished up on a size 12, and that's what I was catching those fish on. So except for one fish that I caught, one of those I caught on the worms, but other than that, I was catching them on maggot. And so you have to be able to change, you have to have a variety of baits. I mean, it's just like me, if sometimes I'll go home at night and ask what's for tea, and the answer might be chicken, and really I feel like pizza. So the fact is, I don't usually bring that up with my wife, but the fish are quite the same. They need to have a variety of baits. So if one's not working, try something else. If some's not working because the fish like it but it's being pulled apart by small fish, you have to have something that you can change to make the day a success. And today worked out that way. So it's worth